Welcome back to Maths on African Motives. In this platform, we shall be focusing on our mathematics for grade 9, and this is under the functions and relations, which is one of the most important part that we need as an introduction, that you need to understand what is it that we are going to refer on the flow diagram. This is a continuation as we had like the basics of our functions or the flow diagram before, considering that on the flow diagram, so like I said, you're just going to have our introduction on the flow diagram. So if you consider the flow diagram, it is a condition whereby they are input values. So you have what is on the input. It goes into the system, which is the rule that you are given to give an output at the end. So there we are simply talking about the input, which is given into a rule, which is the system of your function, and we obtain the output from there. What am I trying to say? This being presented in a diagram in this manner, it's just going to be like this. Let's say this is the presentation of our input values. There we've got our input values. They enter a certain rule, and from that rule, they give us a certain output at the end. So this is it. We have got the values that are in the input, a certain value, a certain value, a certain value, a certain value, just any number that you can think of. So the input value, which is our input values, we are going to refer these input values as x values. So the input, we are talking about the x values. When you talk about a function is referred in terms of x and y. So a function like y is equal to 2x plus 3. So you're going to see that y is going to be written in terms of x, y in terms of x. So the x is the input. The input, it controls the output. The input controls the output. The input, it determines the output. Take note. All right. So these are the input values. Then we have got the rule. That is the rule in terms. So the rule is going to be in terms of x and y. It's going to carry x and it carries y at the same time. Then we are going to talk about the output values at the end. So here there will be output values at the end. All right. Let us just write it this way. Output values. So we are going to obtain the output values at the end, and these are written, you are going to have them in terms of what? In terms of y. So there is a rule there. Let's say it's an equation 2x plus 3, maybe it's minus x plus 4, maybe it's 2x, maybe it's x over 3. These are examples of the rules that can be given. So for each part, we are going to have an input that is entering there. Let's just say we've got a rule like this one. So this input, it enters to a certain value that we do not know. We know this one. We know this one also. We know this one. We know this one. They're entering here. So to enter, that is to substitute the value of x here that you're given. If x is a number which is -1, you substitute here the value of x to get the output value that corresponds to this value. It is going to have its corresponding output value. The same way, this value that we are having, it is going to have its corresponding output value, and so on and so on, all the values that you are given. So what am I trying to say? The number of input values is also the same number of your output values there. If you have got 3 input, there will be 3. If there are 7, there will be 7. If there are 10 values here, these ones also will be 10. The output values. So to determine the output, like I'm explaining, that the output values are obtained from the input values. from the input values. So in another condition, you are going to be given a consideration where there are output values and they need you to determine the input values. It means also you can determine the input values from the output values as long the rule is given. Or they can give us input values, output values, then they ask you to determine the rule. So it's going to be like that. You have to expect any type of a question. So this is the introduction where I need us to focus on finding the output values. So if you are given an input, then you can determine the output value from there, which means the output value, it becomes a dependent. It depends on the input at that condition. So the rule you are given for this time, what you simply need is to substitute. These are the typical questions that you have here. From the explanation that I'm having, I'm simply saying, if you are given something of this nature, determine the output values of the following flow diagrams. So these are flow diagrams that you are given. So we need to determine the output. What is on the output here? And they gave us the input in terms of X, the output in terms of Y. So this one, you already know that you're determining Y. So let's start with number one. On number one, we are given our input values and we need the output values and also the rule, this one. So the rule, what it means, the output, it means Y is equal to the rule that we have here. Y is equal to the what? To the rule. So Y is equal to the rule, meaning to say Y is equal to the rule that we are given, which is 4x plus 4. All right, we're answering question number one. So if Y is equal to 4x plus 4, which is the rule, it means we can determine any corresponding value of Y from these X values that we are given. Let's start with the first one. The input is -1. So they are saying if X is -1, what is the corresponding value of Y at the output here? That is the question. But it must follow through the rule. It must pass through this rule. To pass through the rule means you are substituting into the rule. So if X is -1, we are going to substitute into this rule. Y is equal to 4 times X. So it's 4 into our X is -1 plus a 4. This one, there's a plus 4. So if you are someone who has got issues with directed numbers, at that condition, I'll advise you to use your calculator. Yes, you can just simplify this part. If you understand it, you can just simplify, which is fine. But if you do not understand, then you have to use your calculator. What I'm simply saying is this: 4 times -1, it's -4 plus a 4, that's a 0 there, meaning to say Y gives us a 0. So the value of Y corresponding if X is -1 is a 0. That is the output. So like I'm saying, if you're someone who is having directed numbers, problems, this and that, just use your calculator. That's it. That's 4. You're going to open a bracket 4, then open a bracket into -1. That's -1. You close the bracket plus a 4 like this. So that's a 0 there. Okay. You move on to the other value that you're given. That's a 0 there. So meaning to say we're going to substitute a 0 into the what? Into the formula that you are given. That is Y is going to be equal to what this time? Y is going to be 4 into where our X was here. We are going to put what? A 0. This one, X there is a 0 there, plus a 4. So that's it. On your calculator, you're going to get a 4. So this value, it corresponds with a 4. So it's just substituting already. You just do this on your calculator. Move this arrow here until you get the bracket. Into the bracket, you can delete this. Also delete again. Then you put a 0 there. So this is equal to a 4. So it is the same thing that you are going to have when X is 1. You are going to do the same thing when X is 1. Just move this, delete this, put a 1. That is going to give us 8. So Y is going to be 8 at that moment if X is what? If X is 1. That is how you simply find these ones. So y is equal to, remember we said when x is 1, so it's 4 into 1 plus a 4. That is y is going to be 4 times 1, which is 4, plus a 4, which is 8, which is the same 8 that we see. The same thing, if our x is 2, we are going to substitute, then y was going to be equal to 4 into x, which is 2 plus a 4. So 4 times 2, that's 8, right? If you multiply this, both mass brackets first, so that's going to be 8. 8 plus 4, that's a 12. So this was going to give you a 12. These are the output values. These are the y values. So these correspond to the input that we are given. So these are the input. There are 4 inputs, 4 outputs also at the end. The number of input values, the number of output values at the end. So I want you to try as many questions. I want you to also try number 2. So this one, I want you to try this. All right, let's do number 3 together. On number 3, we still have the same situation, even given a fraction. Still one and the same thing. So on number 3, the rule is given. Remember, I said y is equal to the rule. So y is equal to the rule, that is the output is equal to the rule. So the rule is x minus 5, everything over what? Over 2. That's it. You're done. So we are going to substitute each and every value that you're given in the input. If x is minus 1, the input is x. So y is going to be equal to, in place of x, you substitute minus 1. So that's minus 1 minus 5 over what? Over 2. You just substitute. This is your x value, this one. So y at this moment was going to be minus 1 minus 5, which is minus 6. So it was going to be minus 6 over 2, which is minus 3. So y at this moment is minus 3. Also, on your calculator, to verify this, calculator is there. So you simply substitute everything as it is on your calculator. So this is a fraction here. So you're going to have minus 1 minus a 5. Everything over a 2 like this. So this is going to give us a negative 3. All right, so the same situation or the same condition, when this is now equal to, when x is a 9, y is going to be, in place of x, you substitute a 9 minus a 5, everything over 2. So y was going to be 9 minus 5, which is 4 over 2, and 4 over 2 is what? Is 2. So meaning to say, y at that moment is going to correspond to 2. On your calculator, again, you can simply move this, delete the minus 1, and put a 9 there. So that is 9 minus 5 over 2, which is a 2. That's how you simplify these ones. So you simply have to determine this. So you're going to see that this is the same thing that you're going to have the substitution throughout the values. So meaning to say, if x is 13, y is going to be, in place of x, you substitute 13 minus 5 over 2. So y was going to be equal to what? So 13 minus 5, that is going to be something like what? 8 over 2, which is a 4. So you're going to obtain a 4 on that case. So this is how you simply play around with this. So that will be a 4. When 15, you do the same thing. In place of x, you're going to just substitute 15. In that case, that will be a 15. This will give you a 5 at the end. So that's 15 minus 5, which is 10 divided by 2, which is a 5. So that's how you play around with this. Just have to work with more questions in order for you to actually understand these questions. So like I said, I want you also to try, sorry for these. All right, question number 4. Try to substitute, just substitute. Like for an example, if x is minus 2, it means y is equal to the half of x. X is minus 2 plus a 7. If x is a 0 there, y is equal to half of a 0 plus a 7. If x is 2, just like that, you substitute y is equal to the half of 2 plus a 7, and so on. You simplify your values, substitute on the outputs. I want you to try that one. Where there's a challenge, let's communicate. I'm just going to talk about question number 5. Question number 5, we are given the input values, the rule, and we need to determine the output values. So like I said, this is simply taken from the y that you're given, this one, which is equal to the rule that you're given. So it is equal to minus 1 over 4x minus 8. This is the rule that we are given. So it is equal to the output. So what are the output values? First, if x is minus 4, we are simply going to substitute minus 4 in place of x. So y is equal to minus 1 over 4, and x is what? X is minus 4. Then we've got minus 8. So y there was going to be minus 1 over 4 times this. That was going to cancel the 4 and the 4, and we're going to minus minus. That's a positive 1. 1 minus 8, which is minus 7. So that was going to give us a negative 7. Or your calculator is there as a verification. We can do this. We can just do this. That is minus 1 over 4. Remember, there's minus 1 over 4 out of this bracket into the bracket where we've got minus 4 like this. Close the bracket, then subtract an 8. All right, you're subtracting 8 here. So that is going to give you a negative 7. So that's how you play around with this information. So with the same information, if our x is a 0 there, we are going to substitute the same thing. Y is going to be minus 1 over 4 into a 0 in place of x. Then we subtract 8. Any number times a 0, that's a 0 there. So we have got 0 minus 8, which is minus 8. Or just substitute on your calculator in the bracket. You're going to delete this, put a 0 there. This is going to give you minus 8. Exactly the same answer that you're obtaining by just your normal calculation, but just use your calculator to verify. So this is minus 8. We move on. If this x is 12, if the x there that you're given now is a 12. So simply in place of x, substitute a 12. So y is going to be minus 1 over 4 into 12 minus 8. Just like that. So 12 divided by 4, actually this is a 3, then 3 times negative 1 is minus 3. So it's going to be minus 3 minus 8, which is minus 11. So the value there was going to be minus 11, or just use your calculator. You're going to get minus 11. The same thing if this x is equal to 20. If we are given a 20 in place of x, that means y was going to be minus 1 over 4. So it was going to be minus 1 over 4 into the x, which is 20 minus 8. So if we divide this by 4, that will be minus 5. Minus 5 minus 8. So this is minus 5 minus 8, which is minus 13. So meaning to say there, we were going to obtain minus 13 at the end. Or just use your calculator for the verification. Just like what I was doing, you'll see that this is what you're going to have at the end. So the input values that we are having on this table here, they correspond to the output. This value corresponds to this, 0 corresponds to 8, 12 to this, this to this. That is what it means. So meaning to say, sometimes they might give us these output values. Then they'll ask you to calculate the input values. So make sure that you stay tuned for that class from Mason African Motives so that you won't miss that. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel for more till we meet again.